Dan, I'd like to thank you. It's always an honor and a privilege to ask to be able to share my journey in the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous. Before I start, I would like to start with the 7-step prayer. Some of you may know it, some may not. So if you could, it really help if you could join with me. I'll say it, pause, and you can follow with me. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here tonight to do your bidding. Amen. My name is Joe Kanji. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My home group is North Palm Beach Big Book Step Study, Sunday night, 7 p.m., down in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. I was a flight attendant for 10 years and retired. And for the longest time, in 15 or 16 years, I've been in one place for 18 months, and that's down in Newcastle. It's pretty cool. I lived out of a suitcase for a long time. If you're new or you're coming back, thank God, and I love you, and welcome back. We don't shoot our wounded. As we read in More About Alcoholism, Jim, the car salesman, whose name was really Ralph Furlong, and his story was another prodigal story in the first edition. He failed 6 times in rapid succession because he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. And with each time, Bill and Bob worked with him to find out what went wrong. And that's what we do here. We help one another. Get well so you can help another person. What I'm going to do tonight is not waste your time. I am not going to stand here and turn it into an evening at the Improv. I'm not a comedian. I'm not going to stand here and bore you with stories. We know how to get a DUI. We know how to hurt everyone that ever cared about us. We know how to throw up. We know how to get in trouble. And I'm not going to sit here for an hour talking about the mess. I'm here to carry the message. To tell you what I did, how I learned to stay stopped. Because I had an obsession that just wouldn't end. Early on, when Alcoholics Anonymous started in its infancy, after Roland had met with Carl Jung in the 30s up in Switzerland, and him and Sebra helped Ebby and helped Bill and so on and so forth, when a person came to the platform and stood behind the podium, they were told 2 things. Talk about the insanity prior to that first drink and how you found God. And that's what I'm going to do. I exhibited certain defects of character growing up prior to ever drinking or doing any of its cousins. I was a very selfish person. Even in a good family, I wanted what I wanted. And I didn't care how you felt or who I hurt. I was an Italian-American family. My father he had a few different occupations. And I walked around with, don't you know who I am? I remember the insanity prior to that first drink. I remember what it was like to go in the bathroom and run and have to throw up. I remember what it was like to shake and have to get a drink. I remember what it was like to be on the floor, throw up and diarrhea at the same time, being sick. I remember what it was like hurting every single person that ever cared about me, promising them I wouldn't do it again, but continuing to do it, not knowing why. I remember lying, manipulating, making an excuse for anything before I even drank, just to get what I wanted. I didn't start drinking until late. I drank alcoholically from age 17 to 32. Ended up in the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous. Lost everything I had 7 different times. and the whole gambit of institutions and jails and principles. Institutions, see, we're going to the fourth step already. People, institutions, and principles. Institutions and facilities. And I ended up here. For 9 years, I banged my head off the ground to prove to you that I could drink normal. I compared and never identified. I had to prove to everyone that idea that somehow, someday, that I can control and enjoy it, that was the obsession. The insanity was I actually believed the lie, that I'm not that bad. The whole town knew I was sick. I didn't. And I tried every attempt to change environments, brands, this to that, that to this, so I wouldn't get consequences, and it kept getting worse. And after those 9 years being homeless, being picked up by a guy on the street, he says, "Where are you going?" I'm thrown out. "Oh, well, come with me." And I woke up 11 hours later. He drugged and raped me. I had lost everything you told me I would. You said not yet. I didn't believe you. It's only for the grace of God that I survived. So that's as far back as I'm going to go, and we know what comes with what. If you can remember what it felt like out there, I was there too. What happened is I ended up in Florida, and I went to a meeting. The way I ended up at the meeting is just, wow. We can't really go into that. I ended up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous at the Oasis Club on Prosperity Farms Road. And I sat in a meeting that I hadn't been to in years. And I heard people talking just like they normally talk. Vague. I'm not very smart. I need things explained to me. It works if you work. What is it? I have tools today that I use. And I sit on the edge of my seat. What are they? How do you use them? And get a sponsor, work the staff, thank you. And never learn anything. No one ever taught me. But when I got to Florida, there was a guy who not only talked about how he stayed stopped, he talked about what he did and what he did on a daily basis. And when I walked in that door that day, Saturday, January 2nd, 1999, I had come to a conclusion. I was on the beach, but I didn't sit on the beach and pray. I didn't say, "God, please help me. I don't want to feel like this." I didn't do anything like that. I sat there with my head down in the sand, not even looking at the water, just saying, "I can't live like this. I'm so tired." And I felt in my heart I was done. And when I went to that meeting, after the meeting, I walked up to him. And it was like the kid that got picked last at a baseball game. I'm looking at the ground, kicking the ground, and well, I was kind of wondering if, maybe, and he lifted my head up with his finger, and he made me look him in the eye, because I could never look anyone in the eye. And he says, "What?" I said, "Will you help me?" He says, "Help you do what?" I said, "I don't want to feel like this anymore." He said, "I'd be honored." Well, nobody was honored ever for me to be in their presence. So I really didn't know what to do. And he said, "Let me ask you something." I says, "Okay." He says, "What is a sponsor?" I said, "I don't know. They just tell you to get one." He said, "Let me tell you what a sponsor is not." He said, "I'm not here to be your taxi cab. You found your way to Florida, you find your way to a meeting. I'm not here to lend you money. I do not want you to call me on the phone and bitch, whine, moan, and complain. I don't want to hear it. Find a support group. I'm not here to be your sex therapist, marriage counselor, or relationship expert. All I'm here to do is guide you through the steps, show you what I did to get well, so you can help another. If you want to do the work, you want to get down to business, I'm the guy for you." I didn't understand most of it. I was scared, but I had a little bit of hope. I knew other people in the room smiled. You joked, you laughed. And some of your stories I believed. And he asked me if I had a book. I said, "What book?" He says, "Alcoholics Anonymous." I said, "No." He says, "Well, come to the truck," and gave me a book. He said, "I'm going to give you a set of instructions. I'm going to give you my phone. You call one time to bitch, whine, moan, and complain. You need to find another sponsor. Find other people your age that you can relate to that have been successful." I will show you what I was shown, as long as you promise to show someone else when you're through. This book, The Alcoholics Anonymous, he says, contains directions on how to take certain steps. The 12 steps that you hear about in Alcoholics Anonymous. The only set of directions. He says, I want you to go home and read the forward to the first edition, the doctor's opinion, in the first 63 and a half pages. Underline and highlight anything you think is important. Look up any words you don't understand, and call me. I went right home. I got a ruler, and I highlighted and underlined just about everything, because I wanted to prove to this man that I did the work. Because I always wanted to fit in, but I was always such a lie and a cheat. 2.5 hours later, I called him and said, I'm done. He thought I meant I quit. I said, no, I'm done with the reading. And he had me come to his house, and he read for the next 3 hours every single word he told me to read, and explained to me what it meant. He told me at the point I didn't have to understand anything. I would understand later. Was I willing to go to any length? Could I have an open mind? And could I be as honest with myself and with him as I could be at that time? And I said, yeah. And he read through, and he explained certain things. He read things. And even though I did a lot of the cousins of alcohol, it was like this book was written about me. Because later I found out that I didn't have a drinking problem. I had a thinking problem. How I acted and reacted to life. Alcohol was just a symptom. Alcohol was just a solution to all my problems. That's what I ran to. When I put it down, I still had all these problems, all these defects of character that caused me to drink in the first place. I always thought if I just put down the bottle, bless you, that life would get suddenly better. And you know what? I was more miserable sober than I was when I drank. I just wasn't drinking. I was go home, kick the dog, smack the wife, lock the kids in the basement. But I didn't drink today. No. I wanted to be sober and happy. I wanted to be in recovery. So I did what he said. And he read through, and he explained certain things. When we got to, well, first of all, he explained in the forward to the first edition that recovered wasn't cured. I will be an alcoholic every single day for the rest of my life. But I've recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body for today. I'm no longer hopeless. My sanity has been returned. I have a daily reprieve like anyone else. It's the quality of recovery, not the quantity of sobriety. We all have today. And that's what he put into my mind and put into my head. He said a lot of people are going to have a hard time when they hear you introduce yourself that way. But oh well. We got to the doctor's opinion. He explained to me who he was, showed me pictures, and explained everything. And it came down to a physical allergy, a mental obsession. And once I started to drink, I developed the phenomenon of craving. Wow. Yeah. And unless I had a psychic change, I wouldn't get better. But there was a way out. There were other alcoholics who had gone through the same thing, wrote down their experience, and there's meetings where people had gotten well, that if you just follow the path, I promise you it'll turn into a broad highway. And the phenomenon of craving, that obsession was the strongest thing in my life. It made me do things and say things to people that I would never, ever have dreamt. It made me make promises that I knew I couldn't keep. It made me be dishonest. I was afraid, selfish. It drove me crazy. We got to, there's a solution. He explained to me the differences. That in Alcoholics Anonymous, everything is written down for us. Up to the GSO in New York, with how a district business meeting, monthly business meeting, the Robert's Rules of Order should be run. At the group level, how the steps, the traditions, which without the traditions, none of us would even be here. And they're talked so little of. How wonderful the second and the fifth tradition is. The first one about unity. And how important 11 and 12 are for the anonymity. He described to me the differences. That these rooms, these halls, us together, are a fellowship. The program is the 12 steps contained in the book. A set of principles, spiritual in nature, when practiced as a way of life, could expel the obsession to drink. That I didn't come to the program I didn't come to the program in 1999. The program didn't save my life. The fellowship did. And on page 17, it talks about that. People that normally wouldn't mix, but there exists a fellowship, a friendliness that is indescribably wonderful. But meetings in itself were not enough. That joy and escape doesn't subside as we go our individual ways like the people in the shipwreck. That happiness stays through 24 hours a day. And early on, when I did come to a meeting, I felt good, but when I left, I crawled out of my skin. Couldn't wait to get to the next meeting. Well, that changed through this process, through being around here. There was a way out. It was the 12 steps. He read through about the insanity, self-knowledge, willpower, denial, self-delusion. Yeah, I shook my head. Did I understand everything? No. He told me I would later. As long as I was just willing, honest, and open. He kept saying that they were the essentials. I would understand later. We got to more about alcoholism, and did I start to see some things. The obsession, the delusion, that unreal perception that someday, somehow, I'd be able to drink normally. I'll show you. That has to be smashed. That we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. Yeah, later, I will learn how to know as truth. At step one, all I have to do is simply admit. Not accept, admit. Realize there's a problem, admit there's one, and be willing to turn it over. And a progressive illness, always worse, never better, over any period of time. It's always right there. He read on page 37 after Jim's story, there's always that curious mental phenomenon that parallels with our sound reasoning, that invariable trivial excuse for taking that first one. I would rationalize, justify, make excuses for everything to take that first one, not even caring what the consequences were. I identified it, and they wrote a book in April of 1939. And here it was 60 years later, and I'm saying, yeah, that's me. And he read, and he showed me where my problem was on page 35. The mental states that preceded a relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the crux of the problem. He explained to me that I relapse days, weeks, and months before I pick up. It's not that first sucker drink that's the problem, it's me. I start to act and behave days, weeks, or months before I pick up. And then when I pick up, I wonder why. That's why a home group, getting a place that I can go to once a week at least, so people can get to know me. You might save my life. Joe, you're swearing more than you used to. Joe, you're being really short. Joe, you're doing this. I may have relapsed already, but just didn't pick up. I start to act and behave the way I used to, way before I pick up. And that curious mental states that preceded the drink was my problem the whole time. I was never given the tools to become aware of when I started to act like I used to. I never did any work. I got to step two. It's pretty... My time's up already? He explained to me that step two was simply being willing to believe in something other than Joe could help Joe. I got to choose my own conception of a higher power. I didn't have to have his. It wasn't religious, it was spiritual. And if I had an open mind to that, that's all that was necessary to make a beginning, is that willingness. I would come to believe later. It tells us so 4 times in that chapter. After taking other simple steps, after following other simple requirements, after following a few simple rules. Afterwards, I'll accept many things at first were hard to understand. And he made it that simple for me. Are you willing to believe something other than Joe could help Joe? Yeah. When we got to page 60 to 3 pertinent ideas, he explained to me that's what the beginning of the book was meant to be. It was a selling point. When the word of mouth movement didn't work, of me telling you what to do, and when you went home to your city, and they needed to write it down so it didn't get misconstrued or watered down, and the beginning of the book was designed to sell us on 3 pertinent ideas. A, that I was an alcoholic. B, that probably no human power could relieve my alcoholism. But C, God could and would if he sought it. The original manuscript read, if you are not convinced of these 3 vital issues, reread the book to this point, or else throw it away. That's strong for a book. But this is life and death. And he asked me if I was convinced of those 3 vital issues. And I said yes. And he read on. Then he went and read about the actor trying to run the show. I'm like, geez, oh man. I had read it real quick after the meeting, the 2 hours, and then 60 years ago the book was written, and it was just like it was just last year. The behaviors, the consequences, the actions, the conduct, the collateral damage. I identified so strongly. I knew there may be some hope for me. We got through, read over on 62 about selfishness and self-centeredness being in trouble, the root of it. But it was driven by fear, self-delusion, and self-pity. Didn't know much about that stuff because I didn't think I had a problem. Knew I was an alcoholic and I admitted it. But I didn't think I was selfish. I didn't think I was afraid of anything. The only thing I was afraid of is not getting more. I thought in my mind, running out. The only inventory I ever did was inventory how much beer was left in the fridge. For real. So I was good at inventory in that aspect. But it talked really strong in that page. If I don't get rid of self, it will kill me. There's only one way to get rid of that. My conception of a God. The last paragraph, there is a God and I'm not him. Then the top of 63 was the third step promises that happened in step 10. Asked me how I prayed. I sat on my knees. We knelt down. And this is like 2:30 in the morning. The guy I just met 7 hours ago, wanting to hold my hand on his knees. I did it. He said the third step prayer. I read it, and we said it together. Sat on the couch, and he threw a notebook on my hand, in my lap. And he said, next. That's what the book says. Not next week, not next month, not next year. Right now. We are going to launch on a course of vigorous action. The first step, which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us never attempted. Then the third step, warning. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it would have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Liquor was just a symptom. We got down to causes and conditions. I knew the results of my drinking. I never knew why I did it. But he told me that I was going to find out. But first he gave me some definitions. Launch, to propel with force like a rocket ship. Bill Wilson was a comparison writer. Didn't like to say the same word over and over. He used a lot of different words that meant the same thing. But launched, vigorous, and strenuous mean powerful action, powerful energy, right now. I need to immediately repair the damage, lest I pay the price of a spree. It tells us in the 7th chapter. And he told me the warning. This third step was vital and crucial, necessary to sustain life, and very important, but it would mean absolutely nothing unless I followed it with action. Action that they already told me on page 55, that deep down is that idea of some sort of God, but it's obscured, it's blocked. They told me again, I have to face and be rid of what's blocking me from my higher power before I can turn it over to him. Uncover, discover, and discard those things in myself. So we started on a personal inventory, and step 4 blew my mind. There are 470 some odd ways to do a 4th step around the country in all the fellowships. There's one way in Alcoholics Anonymous, between pages 64 and 69 of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. He showed me how to go through my life and look for certain things that were important. Making a list of people, institutions, and principles with whom I was angry. To go back through my life. And once I had gotten a list down, he had shown me in a notebook how to do what's on page 65. Only write on the left-hand side of the notebook and make 3 columns. Who I'm resentful at, the cause, and the effect. Why I was angry, and what was affected. And Clarence, he was unique when he said things, and he talked about the 4 dimensions that we have to look for. And the first 3 columns examined the physical, emotional, and mental dimensions. When I went through, I wrote down a lot of resentments. Why I was mad. And there was things that were affected, like self-esteem, the way I felt about myself, fear, my emotional security, personal relationships, sexual relationships, pocketbook ambition, even pride sometimes. even though that page 65 was lost when it went to Works Publishing, and Bill had to write it up real quick and kind of put pride in the middle word. But it's the way I perceive you to see me. And I had to write down who I was resentful at. My mother, not buying me a candy bar, what it affected. My father, for not telling me he was proud, what was affected. There was even the male nurse. I'm resentful at the male nurse. He raped me. Self-esteem, fear, security, personal relationship. So after writing all these down, I found out that I was right. Finally. Because when I was out there, I spoke fluent victimese. It was always your fault. I was never to blame. If you wouldn't have said what you said, I wouldn't have gotten in trouble. If you wouldn't have did what you did, my life would have been great. So I was right. It was all your fault. Then came page 66. Then I sat back down in my chair, and Wilson mentions the word resentment 14 times in the 5th chapter. He mentions the word convinced 5. He starts to repeat himself because it starts to get down to business now. I had to look at it from an entirely different angle now in that 4th column. The key to the future, they call it, because without this part, there was no way I could have done 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, or 11. There's no way I can continue to take inventory if I never took it in the 4th step. I had to look where I was selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and afraid in every resentment. The exact nature of my wrongs that I have to admit. My character defects, my shortcomings, all the same word. And when I turned it around and looked at my part and see what I wanted, how I justified being angry at you by telling myself a lie, the action I took every time you made me mad, by either stuffing the feeling, putting you down in front of others, or arguing and confronting you, and everything that I was afraid of, it was like, wow. For instance, my father, I'm resentful at him for, we're supposed to disregard the other person. The resentment was he never told me he was proud. Well, when I turned it around and looked at where I was selfish, I wanted him to tell me he was proud. How did I justify it? I said I was the best son. He should have been. I stuffed the feeling, and I was afraid of not being loved. And I'll bring this up since there's so many women tonight. There are resentments I had that were not my fault. I was a victim. But in order for me to realize that God forgives me, I forgive me, and I could forgive that person, I needed to look at, I'm resentful at the male nurse. It affected my self-esteem, fear, security, personal relationship. I had to look at my part. What part? I asked Danny. What did you want or not want? I didn't want to be raped, okay? The dishonesty, what lie did you tell yourself? I never hurt anyone. Well, of course you did. What was the self-seeking behavior? I stuffed that feeling. What was the fear? I was afraid that you would find out a man raped me. I turned it around. And by going through that process, reading that to him, and asking him to remove it, I was able to forgive this guy and not carry that around anymore. I could forgive myself and know that God forgives me. And all the resentments turned in like that. Then a fear inventory and a sex inventory, the last part, the most important part. 10 questions. Where was I selfish, dishonest, and considerate? Whom did I hurt? Big one. Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where was I at fault? What should I have done instead? And was it selfish? 10 questions. Not about the acts of sex, but my conduct, my behavior in every relationship that I was ever in. And the collateral damage that it caused. I hurt everyone whose lives touched me. Everyone. And by looking at this conduct and this behavior in every relationship, the 4th question turned out to be my 8-step list as well as my resentment list. I couldn't believe it. No wonder I was still single at 32. My whole world opened up, and I saw that there are some things now that I need to change. Mainly my ideas, attitudes, and behaviors. But thank God for that part. In step 5, we spent a long time reading. After the 5th step, the 5th step promises on page 75 actually started to come true. It tells us, withholding nothing, after sitting here and after taking this step, withholding nothing, every deep, dark cranny of the past, we are delighted. We could look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling the drink problem had disappeared will often come strongly. We'll feel though we're walking hand in hand on a broad highway with the spirit of the universe. Whew. See, the 9-step promises get a lot of airplay. But they're just the 9th-step promises. Every chapter in that book has promises, prayers, warnings, and instructions. Every one. The 3rd step and 2nd step promises don't come true until 10, after my sanity's returned. That was rocketed into the 4th dimension. But when these 5th step promises started, some of them, can't tell you when the obsession left, but it did. I felt peace. I finally told someone everything about myself. Not my secrets, the exact nature of my wrongs, my character defects, the shortcomings, the things that block me from the Son of the Spirit. And something that I had never dreamt of, because I never really heard it explained that way. I've always heard it explained, 20, 25 minutes, tell somebody a couple secrets and you're good to go. Or this big 4-step was so hard, and I was always afraid. And it was so silly, and I could laugh today because I lived in a town of 22,000 people, 18,000 of which knew I was a drug alcoholic, knew I couldn't go in any grocery store, cash a check, no bar let me in it, but I didn't want to tell anything about myself. What? That's how delusional I was. I was afraid to tell you things that you already knew, but I didn't think you knew. But once I did that with my sponsor, I felt relieved. I felt free. And it said the first time anything about time in that book. Go home and sit quiet for an hour. It was the first time I could sit quiet, being bipolar and all, without my mind going 7,000 miles an hour. It was an experience that I hope you don't miss. It's something you can't describe. It'd be like a woman trying to describe to me what it's like to have a baby. You gotta have one to know. You gotta do the 5th step to find out. And that's what I tell guys. You do a 5th to go buy one. Don't waste time. This is life and death. Well, after that hour, there were some questions, and it talks about the keystone of this arch we walk a free man, and I'm not going to get into semantics and show you what page or this back and back. He explained these things to me. After 5, and we did 6 and 7, he read pages 76 to 103 the same day, steps 8 through 12, because that's what the book says. Next, now we need more action. Now we need action and more action. Step 6 was 2 questions. It wasn't go to the store and buy another book. It was, are you ready to have him remove everything which you just admitted was objectionable? Can he take them? Sure. There was no time, no moment in time that I was ever more ready. I just found out what they were. I was promised that they weren't going to go away and stay away, though. But was I willing to have him take them? The 7-step prayer on my knees, humbly asking him to remove what was going to stand in the way of me going out to start making amends and living in the present. When I stood up, my sponsor hugged me and welcomed me to AA. He said, you just did what separates the men from the boys. He said, unfortunately, this is when the work starts. Most people think 4 and 5. I did a 4th and 5th step. Why aren't things getting better? Because there's 12 steps. After step 7, it says, now, let's look at steps 8 and 9. Now we need more action, without which we find faith. Without works is dead. And I had assembled a little bit of faith now. But without works, and what are the works? Self-sacrifice, unselfish, constructive action. Carrying the message, helping another. Me just praying isn't going to be enough. Well, we have a list. We made it when we took inventory. I already had my 9-step list. My 4th-step became my 9-step reference book. My 8-step list. See, chapter 5 is called Into Action, not into thinking, into feeling. It contains the instructions for steps 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Over half the steps. Over half the pages are devoted to this phase of our development. Step 9. Restitution, making amends, cleaning up my past, leading me to believe that it was very important to go out there and straighten what I had done, make it right and do my part so I could be peaceful and happy. We read through and we learned the different amends to make. The financial, the emotional, family. Not to dodge my creditors. Don't shrink. Don't balk at this step. It's easy to stop because things are getting well and you're getting better. And he was urged me not to. And he told me when I went out, if my manner was calm, frank, and open, I would be gratified, like the book said. And most amends would go good. There's going to be some people that don't want to see me, tell me just get going. But I did my part. Some of the best amends I can make by my behavior, how I act today, living amends. There was the financial amends. There was the relationship amends. There was amends with my family, which it talks about in 82. Passing all understanding as the patient's wives and mothers have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, there'd probably be no homes today or perhaps be dead. I had to sit down with my family and say, thank you. I had to make amends of commission, what I did to them, and the amends of omission. You needed me and I wasn't there for you. When I got to step 9, I had an awareness and understanding of what I did and how I hurt you. So I could go to you and set it right. And amends has nothing to do with saying I'm sorry. When they go in Washington, make an amendment to the Constitution, they don't go to the piece of paper and say I'm sorry. They change it. And amends means to change. I need to change the way I act and behave. And by learning my defects of character through the 4th and 5th step, uncovering, discovering, and discarding the things that kept me unhappy, I can go out today and not repeat the behaviors that caused me to have to make amends in the first place. While I'm doing this, page 84 tells me very specifically, I have to vigorously commence this way of living, steps 10 and 11, as I'm cleaning up the past. I don't do 9 and wait till I'm done. I need to work 10, 11, and 12, the maintenance steps, daily. Like my life depends on it. Like the 5th sentence down on page 28. We in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of a drowning man. When I came into the fellowship, I had that desperation. In the middle, when I was doing the work, I had that desperation. And today, I still have that desperation. I only have a daily reprieve. And I told Dan on the way over, a long-timer told me a long time ago, you start getting complacent, you better come place your ass in one of these seats. And it's true. So the important thing for me, my sanity, my peace, is to practice the 10th, 11th, and 12th step every single day of my life. Continue to take inventory and set right and continue to take personal inventory. There you go. That's classic. See? But it's more than just that. For me, I have to continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. What I happen in the 4th step. Any time during the day, if I have to do it 100 times a day, when anything crops up, the tools that I'm given through this fellowship to be happy and peaceful is to at once ask God to remove it, talk with another person immediately, make amends quickly if I've harmed anyone, and resolutely turn my thoughts to someone I can help. That any time I get pissed, paranoid, or panic-stricken during the day, pause. Hit that pause button. Pause when agitated or doubtful. That's hard to do. To let the emotion go by rather than reacting to it right away. It takes practice. But the 10th step helps me stay sane daily. I can reset at any time during the day. Page 86, top paragraph, every night before I go to bed. Whether I listen to it or I read it. Constructively review my day. If I do this, there is no need to ever do a 4th step again. I look at where I'm resentful to the day, selfish, dishonest, or afraid. Did I hurt anybody? Do I need to say anything to anybody? Do I need to make amends? Did I do anything good today? Look at the good as well. Ask for forgiveness and show what corrective measures can be taken. Because I go to bed with a clear conscience. I don't wake up tomorrow with any bitterness towards today. Anything that happened, I've let go, and I start tomorrow off free. Clean slate. I don't hold on to those feelings and harbor those resentments. I can't afford to. I'll die. And steps 10 and 11 are so important. And there's probably just as many ways to pray and meditate as there are people in the world. And I'm learning. One of the biggest things I've learned in my recovery is to remain teachable. I have to. There's always something new to learn. Everyone has something to say. And my God, my higher power, talks through others. He talked to a little cartoon the other night the kids were watching, Land Before Time. Little, yes, 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 no, 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 little dinosaur. They sang a little song, and it was God answering a prayer, I said. So I have to be listening all day long, because through people, through actions, through things, my higher power speaks. And I have to be willing to hear, you know. The big part for me is step 12. I'm retired, I don't work. I take guys through the steps like it's going out of style. I demonstrate these principles in every single thing I do, whether it's pushing the carts into Walgreens if they're scattered before I go in, going to get my allergy shot at the doctor's office, and an elderly man sitting in a wheelchair, and the van driver just pushed him in and went outside smoking, and go shake his hand and treat others how I want to be treated. I demonstrate these principles in every single thing I do. But what I do a lot is I take men and women through this process as often as possible, whomever wants to do the work. I'm like Danny. I don't get people that don't want to do it. You either want to do the work or you don't. You know, if you're going to call me, we're going to get to it. Because it's just incredible. When I got to step 10, we got to the bottom of page 84, it says, we have ceased fighting anyone or anything. And on page 60, it talks about the actor. We're always in a fight with something. By this time I got to step 10, it says, for this time sanity will have returned. The problem will be removed. We will feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. This is where the step 2 finally came to fruition for me. I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Just like the book said, I had to do some work to acquire that belief. I had to just be honest, open, and willing at the beginning. This is where the 10-step warning on page 85 holds so dear to my heart, because it is so easy to stop striving for success when things start to get well and good, and stop having that discipline and stop. I need to put God and my recovery first above everything and everyone, a day at a time, as long as I live. Family Afterwards is great about the 2 different ways we can go, and as soon as we start putting material progress ahead of AA, we're going to lose it. I can't put anything in front of my recovery or God. I learned the hard way years and years ago. But it's easy to let up in the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We're headed for trouble. We're not cured. We have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. Turn my will and life over. If I've carefully followed directions at this point, I've begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into me. It's what it's telling me in step 10. When I got to step 10, I discovered a day at a time. You would tell it to me when I was out there, and when I first came in, I couldn't do that. I lived in 2 time zones. I was a slave to my past. I was filled with regrets and resentments. The past owned me. When I wasn't in the past, I was in the future, filled with anxieties and anticipations. I was never here. I was never now. What is here? What is now? My higher power. And I can do that today. It's 8 o'clock. I got 3 more hours before I go to bed. That's all I got to do the best I can. Tomorrow, if I get up at 9 and I go to bed at 10, I have 13 hours to do the best I can. Not even 24. I keep it that simple. In step 10, third step promises come true. And I haven't done it long enough, obviously. But it says, when we sincerely took such a position, turning my will and life over, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer. Danny always told me that you hear how it works, I don't know how, but it just does. And he tells me that in a nutshell on page 63, the third sentence, explains it pretty well. Being all-powerful, He provided what we needed if we kept close to Him and performed His work well. Established on such a footing, turning my will and life over, my thoughts, my actions, aligning my will with what I believe God's is today is all that is. And in step 10, it says we can exercise our willpower along these lines all we wish. I will always have self-will. Before it was run riot. Today it's used properly. My motives are pure. My will is to do His. If something happens, there's no way I took my will back. I keep taking my will back. The will never went anywhere. I can't take something from one who has all power. My will is to do His. If I screw up, it's my fault. But once I align my will with what I believe he wants for me, and to learn how to be kind and humble, loving and forgiving, established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans, our designs. More and more we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, and the hereafter. We were reborn. Those promises hit me hard. It was really true. Because in step 11 on page 87, it says, having just made conscious contact with God, it's not probable to be inspired at all times. And that's when I just found a higher power is going through this process, getting to the 10th step, learning how to talk and listen, reading 86 to 88 every morning when I wake up, 86 every night before I go to bed, one paragraph, when we retire at night. Changed my world. It's a discipline. I was in the Army. I was in the Navy too, because I can't do anything in moderation. I did a lot of things, but I liked discipline. And they outline it in a simple way that it's discipline in this book is what I need. I needed something tangible. And today, those 12-step promises, to watch a fellowship grow, to see people recover, to watch them help others, this is an experience you must not miss. We know you do not want to miss it. Frequent contact with each other and newcomers is the bright spot of our lives. It's true. I work with as many people as I can. And there's a lot of people that have time that are the ones that are still suffering in Alcoholics Anonymous too. Leo had 43 years, Steve 26. There's a lot of people that have had time in the fellowship that felt something was missing and still wanted to go through the process. So I reach out to anyone and anyone, because it says intensive work with other alcoholics. To accomplish in a short time a great deal of work. We must repair the damage immediately lest we pay the price of his spree. We have to walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. It's something that I can do because I'm not working right now. I can give that attention. I can work with guys, men and women, and get them through this process so they can help another. And the great thing about that is it plays a vital part in my own sanity and happiness too. It's the only place you can give something away totally and still receive something back, and not doing it selfishly. It's an awesome fellowship, and it's a great way of life, one that I had never thought I could ever have. Most of my waking moments were praying that I just wouldn't wake up, trying to get enough, I'm going to say it nicely, guts to jump in front of that train. Half of the 17 to 32 was just wishing I was not there. I went to the mental institution and actually pleaded for shock treatments. And he says, why? Because if you get them, you forget your past, and maybe I'll stop hurting everybody that loves me. If you know enough to ask for that, we're not giving them to you. That's how desperate I was. And today the obsession's not there. I don't not think about drinking. It's how can I help another? Most of us found that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings, viewpoints, and respect for their opinions is what makes us useful to others. I have to think of you and how I may help meet your needs. And by growing in understanding and effectiveness and working with people, I know what approach to take with certain people. The directions, the program stays the same. But the approach with different people, we learn through the years and with what person how to do what. And that's the greatest gift that I could have, is let God demonstrate through me what he can do. It's truly an honor to even have someone ask me a question and really listen to the answer. No one cared about me. And the ones that did care about me, I pushed them away. So I'd be at rehab and they said, well, who should we call in case of emergency? I thought it was a trick question. I said, call 911. And they're like, no, who should we call? I'm like, there is nobody to call. Nobody wants to see me or be around me. But that's not true today. I was able to clean up my past. I was able to recreate my life. And the book says that it was designed to help me find a power greater than myself, which would solve my problem. And it has. That's how I found God. I faced my past, got rid of it, forgave myself and others. And today I can be at peace and happy. I always like to close with a couple things from A Vision for You. Bottom of 162, top of 163. Though you be one man with this book in your hand, We hope and believe it contains all you will need to begin. To duplicate with such backing what we have accomplished is only a matter of willingness, patience, and labor. And in the last few paragraphs on page 164, our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and we will surely meet some of you as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. My name is Joe Kanji, and I'm a recovered alcoholic.